Hello again, Eric here with Steffen Outdoors. Today I'm just out and about taking a look at some tree lines, some areas where we planted some trees around food plots and where I want to improve things in the future. So come on along and let's see what we've got out here in our field. All right, here's a spot where we've got some deer coming through off a little trail, crosses my driveway actually. And we're separated by some cedar trees, a couple of balsams and some spruce. And it's right alongside the house. But just having this little barrier of trees is making them comfortable enough that they're walking through here. As I look out into the rest of the field, we've got a little clump of trees here that we planted. They're growing up, deer are cutting through there. But as you can see, it's a pretty extensive field. We had corn planted alongside of us this season. You can kind of see the stubble there that hasn't been tilled under. And then we've got a patch of trees down in the background. Otherwise, this is pretty much an open field, so we don't see that many deer out in the field here. Right here in the middle of the field, right down the middle of the spring, we stuck a couple of maple trees here in the end, and we put a line of popples in. It was so wet this spring, most of them didn't make it. We've got one little maple here on the end that's looking pretty good. The rest of them are pretty short. I think in the spring we're going to try put some more popples in here. Maybe put some weed barrier down around them so they don't have to compete with the canary grass here. And hopefully they'll grow up and create a little bit of a barrier between the woods over here on the left and a cornfield over here on the right. Sometimes that's a hay field too. Usually it's about half hay and half corn. Either way, I want those deer to feel more comfortable coming out into my field and working their way out of the woods. Otherwise, on the edge of the wood line over here, the deer tend to not want to come out. They'll sit on the edge for 10, 15, 20 minutes before they even come out into the field. Sometimes, especially later in the season, they won't even come this far. They'll stay deeper in the woods or they'll go somewhere else. So we're working on trying to get them more comfortable working their way to our food plots and there's places where I've got some apple trees planted. Down along the edge of the woods here, I do have some apple trees planted. I pointed some of those out in a video where I talk about planting apple trees near my food plots. I would think that it'd be a bigger attraction to the deer than it is. Well, they're pretty small and there's not enough barrier between them and what's going on out here in the field and then next door. So I'm going to turn around and show you what's next door so you get an idea what we're dealing with. Alright, so we've got a farm over here. Here's this tree line we were looking at with a maple tree down the end where we stuck some popples in. There's a lot of activity up around that farm. The deer come walking out of the woods and eyes go right to that farm and they get real spooky and skittish. So what I'm trying to do here is we're going to work on getting a bit of a barrier so they can't see what's going on over there. Hopefully that'll help the deer feel more comfortable over here, which increases our opportunities when we're out here hunting. From where I'm standing here, we're a little over 250 yards to the wood line down there. So it's a pretty long stretch of field. This is one of those areas where it's just too far for those deer to feel comfortable. So right next to me here, we got a little patch of trees, just a handful. This is a place where, you know, I could put a turkey blind in the spring, maybe a little tripod for deer hunting. But then right next here, we've got a little patch of soybeans. And when we get into the winter months, late December, early January, the deer will come out and eat in this little soybean patch just about every night. So they really enjoy that. So this is really a later season plot. Doesn't do a lot of good in the early season unless it's still real bright green. But this time of year, if you can see by looking at the ground, there's a lot of tracks in here. So they're hitting it pretty hard this time of year, and over the next few weeks they'll be out here quite a bit. And here's another block of trees that we saw just a bit earlier. These trees were planted back in spring of 2005, and they've gotten quite large. We'll take a closer look at them. So here I am down along the fence line. We planted 2 rows of trees all the way down the fence line, and then this block of trees in the middle here. And this is kind of dual purpose. It's a little bit of shelter from the wind. So this time of year, we get all kinds of pheasants, turkeys, things like that hanging out in here, sheltering themselves from the wind. We got our patch of apple trees here, and a little tree line that's a 16-foot tripod out in the middle of it, to give you an idea how big those are. Here's that little soybean patch again, and then there's some brassicas, turnips and things right out over here, and that's what the deer have been digging around in there eating as well. So there's quite a bit of traffic in and out of these pines. Various different trails the deer are taking. Lots of pheasants in here. They plant pheasants nearby on the farm in the fall. Anything that survives comes here in the winter time. These trees are quite large as well. Try and give you an idea just how big they are. A couple apple trees here on the edge. So there's about 3 rows wide in this tree line here. And I've got some video footage of a little buck fawn I saw out here in the muzzleloader season that circled this stand while I was sitting in it. And he felt pretty comfortable, but the trouble I had right over here along the woods, there's a drainage ditch and there's a bridge over it, and he stood on that for 15 minutes before he came out. He just didn't want to come out of there. Wasn't comfortable. And then you can see we've got a pond here that we dug, and what that pond does, it's a wetland scrape. It's only about 4 feet deep, so we get waterfowl nesting in here and that type of thing. We put a couple of small patches of pines along in 3 different places along here. And so the birds and the turkeys and various things come in there for shelter when it gets cold. And it helps break things up a little bit, make them feel more comfortable. Here's this larger patch of pines from a little bit different angle. All around this pond, they go to one side or the other. On this side, usually they come pretty close to the pond, and we can see a little bit of a path out here in front of us. I'll walk up through that for you. You can see they've been hitting that path pretty hard, pretty consistently. And they'll either go to the left or to the right. If they go to the left, they're either going to stop by the turnips and the other brassicas, or they're going to head on to the soybeans. If they go the other direction, same thing. There's more brassicas in there, and then a soybean patch farther over. So here's the little bridge I was telling you about, over this little drainage ditch. There's a lot of foot traffic from deer going over this bridge. And if we look out, you can see the little tree line and a stand sitting up there. But off to this side, we see that farm. That little buck fawn stood on this bridge here, right where I am, for 15 minutes before he finally came out. And that's something that we're going to try to change. I want to get some brush. There's a little bit there, but I want to get some brush and other tree growth in place so that they can't see what's going on over there, and they feel more comfortable coming out here, getting something to eat. As I make my way back to that little tree line, I'm just going to show you here. Here's another little path that's a little bit farther over that meets up with the path I'm on, which is coming from that little bridge. So this tree line works really well, shielding deer off to the left from everything that's going on the other side, but there's still a pretty good expanse. It's about 150 yards from this tree line here, to the far end of the pond where all of these aspens and popples are growing. So we might try to break that up a little bit more as well. I've moved a little to my east, so now we can see the first little patch of pines that we planted near the pond. There's the tree line that we had planted to isolate the deer a little bit from what's going on to the west. And then we have a pretty good block of trees right in front of me here. It's a little bit open in the middle. There's Christmas trees planted up in there, but quite a few deer tracks down in there. This is all, I can't see it under the snow, but there's turnips, kale, rape, all kinds of brassicas planted in here, and quite a bit of that's eaten off now. I'm going to zoom in on some of this and show you. You can see the stems where they've eaten all those leaves right off of there. So they've really been enjoying this. And again, here's a little patch of soybeans right here. But here's a spot, this 150-yard stretch. I think I need to break this up a little bit with a little more, a few more trees of various types. I've got some apple trees up here along the edge of the woods, but I don't think that's enough. I think I need something about halfway here to make this a little bit of a smaller food plot. And you know, a lot of people have been talking in the last few years here about micro food plots or mini food plots. Well, this is a spot where you can do just that. The soybean patch is not very big. It's maybe 100 feet long and about 40 feet wide. But my son was able to take a buck off of this field with his muzzle loader. So this is interesting. At one point, somebody drove through with a four-wheeler here, and the path is absolutely loaded here with turkey tracks. Now, there's a few deer tracks I can see under here as well, but lots and lots and lots of turkey tracks. But they head back into the cedars and hemlocks out in front of me here, and they roost in there sometimes during the day, but very, very often at night. So apparently this is a favored path for them. And it goes right along this little patch of pines and spruce that we planted here, which kind of shields them from the rest of the field, which tells me they're comfortable with those smaller, more confined open areas as opposed to the large open areas. Here's another place I'm on the far end of the pond now. I see deer coming through here very often, but what they'll tend to do is they'll get near the edge of the woods, sometimes 15 yards, 20 yards in, and they'll just stand there. and they'll look around and they won't come out and they won't come out. Ends up being almost past shooting light, or 5 minutes before shooting light before they finally come out. That's typically later in the season after they've been pressured. In the summer they'll come out earlier, but we want them to feel comfortable all the time, so we need to get something in here down along the edge of this pond. They're more comfortable in this area, so maybe some pines, maybe some popples in through here. Just a little bit more of a barrier for them. All right, I'm on the other end of the field now. If you can see behind me, there's a little bit of a cornfield back there. And earlier I showed you where we planted 2 rows of trees down along the fence line. Well, down on this end, we planted a bunch more rows. And we're gonna take a look at that real quick. So even though on this end I can still see the cornfield a little bit in the background, this all was wide open. You'd almost never see deer here in the daytime. But now the deer come out to these food plots fairly regularly, at least till mid to late October. They start getting a lot more hunting pressure in the area, then they don't like it so much anymore. But again, it's a little bit too long of a field here, and I think with the pond there, they just can see a little farther than what they'd like. Do the deer really like these pines? Do they really make them feel safe? By the look of all the tracks in here, I'd say yes, they like it a lot. You can see down in here, the pheasants have been picking away at pine cones, and the squirrels have been picking away at pine cones. The deer and the snow is pretty beat down in here from deer, turkeys, pheasants running around in here. Quite a bit lower in here than it is out in the field. Out of the cornfield, several paths right into the pines. Remember, this was all open field. There was absolutely nothing between this field and the cornfield next door. So all these deer are running around in here all the time. Very rare to see them during the day until we planted all these trees, some of which are 16, 18 feet tall now. So just to recap, over in the distance in the corner, I want to add some trees in the far end of the pond. I've got a bridge right over here, and I want to add some trees over here to help shield that a little bit. And maybe along the length of this field, maybe in the middle somewhere, maybe something along there to about halfway or so to try to make that just a more comfortable area for the deer. I think this spot too could use a few more trees. It gets pretty wet in the spring. It's hard to plant food plots here anyway. And if this will help break that field up a little more, make the deer feel more comfortable, it'll be well worth doing. Well, I got a little better idea what I'm working with after taking a closer look. So I'm definitely going to get some pines and some spruce, maybe a few Christmas trees in there. And then we're going to add a few more apple trees in a couple of places as well this spring. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe.